What's up, y'all? What's up, y'all? It is another late night live, depending on where you're at. Some of y'all are viewing from other places around the world. Where I am at, it is about 11 p.m. right now. So, I'm just hanging out. Wanted to chime in on some, do some commentary on some Larry Elder and Thomas Sowell, two of my favorite thinkers, in the space. And so I want to watch some of their videos. I was watching earlier and I was like, this would be good for us to watch together and just, process some thoughts and everything. So um I hope you all are doing well. I'm gonna go ahead and kick this intro and everything, and we're gonna get into it. All right, here we go.
Think, act, and prosper. You are now tuned into the Money Level Show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Money Level Show, where we think, act, and prosper. This channel focuses on changing financial trajectories and building legacies. So be sure to tune into the content, because I talk about a lot of different things, but also give some areas of focus for people who are interested in building their wealth. Speaking of wealth, I got my new silver chain with the you gotta have the Libertad in there, one of my favorite silver coins with the bezel. It's my first time getting a silver chain. So I have a gold one with a $5 Indian head on it. And yeah, so this is my first silver one. Excited to store wealth and purchasing power. So we're gonna get into some reactions today. I want to react to a couple of things. I did a reaction with Larry Elder and Charlemagne the God recently, and just how Larry Elder just chewed Charlemagne out, and then they had this back and forth. Well, not this back and forth, but Charlemagne came out and put Larry Elder as the donkey of the day, um, which is a segment he does where he pretty much almost makes fun of people or calls out hypocrisy and things like that. And so Larry Elder did respond on valuetainment, and we're going to react to that, as well as react to some of Thomas Sowell's content that I recently found. And I recently started listening to the audiobook of White Liberals and Black Rednecks. This book was just fantastic and just amazingly written, and it involves a lot of history, a lot of research that I quite frankly was not aware of. And so we're just going to process a little bit of that as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. If you are watching with me, be sure to drop a comment in the comment section below, so that we can engage with each other. So appreciate you all. Without further ado, let's get to it. All right, so first video we're going to watch is Larry Elder explaining his debacle. I don't even know if that's the right word. I just like saying it, with the Breakfast Club. So here we go.
Padre, Charlemagne the God.
Yes.
We mentioned him a little bit earlier.
Yes.
You were on his show, The Breakfast Club, massive audience, massive black audience. Breaking news, I just found out you're black. That's crazy. I just found that out. Yeah.
Wait,
what? This just happened. Amazing. Respect. But you were on about 2 weeks ago, and then he did a reaction video, and he so politely called you the donkey of the day.
Yeah,
and he went ham on you, brother.
I saw that.
So, he's got a huge voice in the black community, obviously. What do you say to him? What do you say to the black community that they think you're the donkey when you're just like, look, personal power, personal self-improvement, accountability.
Well, he called me the donkey of the day.
All right, really quick. So the Breakfast Club is a hip hop, mostly hip hop show. They bring on a lot of different hip hop artists. They bring on actors and different other people as well, but a lot of hip hop, and they bring on some of my favorite artists throughout the years. Not everyone they bring on is my favorite artist, but it can have a lot of ratchetness in the space, and so like it's kind of interesting when the gentleman here talks about Charlemagne reaching a massive black audience and such, and just the type of content they bring on or the type of drama they bring up, on the show. And this really reminds me of like Thomas Sowell's book, where his book, pretty much white liberals and black rednecks. And where he talks about where these behaviors were adopted from over in England and northeastern parts of England and Ireland and such like that. And so I just wanted to make that quick comment because we are going to listen to a little bit of that audio book, but this is a cool point that I wanted to make based on what he's talking about with Charlemagne's influence in the community, which often revolves around a lot of unprofessional behavior that was typically accredited to blacks in the South. So yeah.
As I recall, because I didn't make the debate stage and I complained about it. And I was on his show saying that there's no systemic racism in America. And here Larry is complaining about the systemic way he did not make the debate stage.
Yeah.
That's what he said. To me, that made no sense. And frankly, I believe he called me the donkey of the day because if you look at the comments, and I have a friend who read every single one of them, and these are his people, 85% of them thought he got his butt kicked.
Yep.
Yeah. So would you go back again?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm tentatively scheduled to go back.
How do you win over not only Charlemagne, but the people who think like Charlemagne? Because there's millions of them.
Tell the truth.
Yep.
Tell the truth.
But they say you can't handle the truth.
I've been doing this for 40 years, what you guys are doing, been for 40 years. And I've noticed something.
So how do you win over people that think like Charlemagne? This was a good question because quite frankly, I struggle with it too. Larry Elder says, tell the truth. I mean, obviously you tell the truth and people have a rebuttal. People are caught into the mindset that where they can't receive any other type of information. And so on the previous video live I did with Thomas Sowell, watching Thomas Sowell, and Thomas Sowell talks about how many of these activists don't want to hear the other side of history or the other side of the coin. And so like sometimes it can be challenging when you're working with people that have been, indoctrinated, for decades, by political parties and such. And so mostly the Democratic Party. And so sometimes when you're mentioning certain concepts, it's hard for them to grasp, or they don't want to hear it. Like they want to hear the victim narrative or be catered to, based off like the atrocities in history. And, history is just like, I'm learning it's not black and white. It has a lot of gray areas, in history. And there's a lot of things that I didn't even know and that I'm learning. And it's opening my eyes, to like, have a better perspective on the world and on our nation. So just wanted to share that really quick, but let's get back to it.
Somebody calls up, and I always took pride in taking people who disagree with me. No one in the middle of a conversation is going to go, you know what? You're right.
Yeah.
I've had an epiphany. It's the person who's driving, who's listening that I'm talking to. And so I know that Charlemagne and the guy's not going to go, Larry, I never thought about this. And you're right. There is no systemic racism. I need to rethink my assumptions. He's not going to do that. But his listeners will. And if you look at the comments, many of them have. Not saying they suddenly become card-carrying, Trump-supporting Republicans, but they're beginning to rethink their assumptions. They know fatherlessness is a bigger problem than systemic racism. They see the schools. They see the crime. Well, can I give you one quick story?
Go for it.
When I was in high school, there was a guy named Gilbert, and he was a iffy kind of student. He wasn't a bad student, but he wasn't somebody that was academically oriented as I was. I told you my dad used to have a cafe, and I didn't like working for him. So when my dad and I stopped talking to each other at 15 years old, I decided to get me a job in the summer with the county, LA County. You had to go downtown and take this big test. There must have been 300 or 400 people. This is in the late 60s. Most of the people there were white. And one of the guys taking the test was this guy named Gilbert from my high school. And I saw him, and it was a 3-hour exam, math, reading comprehension, stuff like that. And then you had to go out in the hall, and then they grade the paper. You come back in. So I see Gilbert. He goes, "Hey, Larry, what's up?" I said, "What's going on, Gilbert?" He said, "Watch out. they're going to get us. I said, who's going to get us? He said, the white people who are grading these exams.
Yeah.
I said, they're going to get us. He said, watch them flunk us. So we go back in, about 300 people, as I said. They call out your name if you are to remain, meaning you pass the test. And then they would give you a bunch of options for jobs. And if you didn't get your name called, you had to leave. So I'm sitting there calling off the names. Of course, my name was called, as were the names of a number of black people. And then you hear a screeching of chairs as the people who weren't called get up to leave. So Gilbert walks right by me and he says, as he sees me sitting there, obviously my name was one of those who was called, who was named. He said, what did I tell you? How can somebody make an argument that white people are going to flunk black people? I'm black. I'm sitting there. I'm not flunked. And he walks by me and he says, what did I tell you? This is the mentality. This is an illness. And a lot of black people have that. We have to raise our game. I remember the dream team in the Olympics because we began losing matches. We can't send.
All right, so he went in with a defeated mindset, Larry Elder sharing, and and he was just like, hey, they're gonna get us, they're going to flunk us, da da da. So he went in with that mentality, and then when he gets flunked, he tells Larry Elder, I told you so. And Larry Elder is another black individual in there taking the test who passed it that didn't flunk. And so and he's talking about the mentality of many people like that, and yeah, it's sad. It's a sad reality, y'all. It's a sad reality. And I think that we do have to step our game up. That's why I appreciate Booker T. Washington, coming out of slavery. Pretty much getting this education, working in the salt mines, all these different things, leading that Tuskegee and building their own schools and things like that, and just really focused on like that self-reliance, that self-sufficiency and the hard work, and that's why I really like Booker T. Washington and such, because to be honest, I don't think we should have as many excuses as we have today. I mean, if we got more excuses than Booker T. Washington, coming out of slavery, being born a slave, in the reconstruction of the South, all those different things. And, if we got more complaints, today than then, that's a problem, and so I do think that we do have to step our game up. We have to compete. We have to, have pride in ourselves in terms of being able to, compete and, educate ourselves and things of that nature. And so otherwise we're going to stay in this mentality and stay in this zone. And so Larry Elder's, speaking to that. So I'm gonna jump over to another video with Thomas Sowell. This one was an older video, but he's talking about, different things, his history and politics, and he says some really key things in here. So we're gonna jump over here. And this is a 4-minute ad. All right, rewind this. Thomas Sowell.
Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robb.
Hang on, y'all. This thing then went off of the video I was on.
You wrote in one of your random thoughts columns, one sign of the Democrats' desperation is that some of them continue to try to tar the Bush administration with innuendos of racism, even though its cabinet members have included people of Hispanic, Japanese, American, Jewish, and Chinese American ancestry, as well as 2 conservative black secretaries of state.
2 consecutive.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes. Well, it does seem a little ridiculous, but it also shows how desperate they are. The Democrats get something like 80 to 90% of the black vote. If that ever falls down to 60 or 70%, they're in deep trouble because they've alienated so many other people that they have a hard time winning elections at all. And so therefore they must try to keep blacks paranoid. I think of this thing about remember the dragging death in Texas some years ago, and they used that against Bush because Bush was against hate crimes legislation. And the fact is that these 2 guys who did this were electrocuted. So whether it was a hate crime or not a hate crime, they're dead. And calling it a hate crime would have changed absolutely nothing. What it would have done was open up the courts to all kinds of litigation because the guy is convicted of a hate crime and his lawyer would say, well, it really wasn't really a hate crime, and they can go through the whole circuit court of appeals and so forth. And so to me, I agree entirely with Bush on this particular point, that doesn't matter what your motivation was. If you did it, you should pay the price.
Why do so many blacks follow the Democratic Party then?
Inertia. Don't forget the Solid South part that followed the Democratic Party for over a century. So blacks have been into this, 60-some years now. I'm hoping that.
All right. So Thomas Sowell saying a good point there in terms of, the South was heavily Confederacy. So if many people, I don't know how many people know this, but the South, the Democrats were the Confederates. So that was the South. And so what he's saying is like, that's where many black people were. And the Democratic Party started pushing these different political ideologies to them and such. And so, which is kind of interesting because, I mean, when you look at Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, they were conservative Republicans. And so, so it's interesting. Some people say the party shifted or switched. I don't know if that happened or not. I don't okay, did they have a big meeting? Like, hey, we're going to be the Democratic and you're going to be the Republican. I don't know how, how that happened, but some people say the party switched, but historically the Democrats were the Confederates and they did have a huge influence over the South. Then you had the breakout, which they went to the Dixiecrats and, things like that. And so, so Thomas Sowell is speaking to like their influence in the South.
Blacks will wake up faster than the Solid South did, but these things go. The Jewish vote has gone Democratic by overwhelming majority, and it's hard to see why, given the policies and so on. But once this inertia gets going, it'll keep going for a long time.
You were a Democrat in 1972, and
Yeah.
You say you haven't been a member of a party since then.
That's right.
Why? Why'd you switch to no party?
Oh, McGovern. When I saw what happened to the Democrats under McGovern, I voted, heaven help us, for McGovern in the primaries in 1972 simply because I was so sick of the Vietnam War. But the more I saw of McGovern and the people around McGovern, the more I realized what a disaster it would be to have this man president. I was never a Nixon fan, and so in 1972 I didn't vote at all, or in 76 for that matter.
How does Richard Nixon look now in retrospect?
A lot better.
Why?
Well, you compare him with, say, Clinton. Nixon was was threatened with impeachment. He quit. He spared the country. He wasn't going to fight it. Even more so if you go back to 1960 when there was an extremely close race between Nixon and Nixon and Kennedy. And there were people saying, there was all kinds of voter fraud in Chicago. I mean, voter fraud in Chicago is not a new idea. And they're saying he should challenge it. He refused to challenge it. The country should not be put through that. The stuff that went on in Florida in 2000, that kind of stuff. He spared us all of that.
What was your feeling about Jerry Ford?
I like President Ford. I think Ronald Reagan was better. But the thing that I guess the one thing that really made me upset with President Ford was pardoning Richard Nixon. I was driving my car on the highway when I heard the news, and I immediately got off the highway because I don't like to drive when I'm angry. And until I calmed down and went again, because of course what it said was there are people out there who don't, who are essentially above the law. And I think that is the worst thing you can do. Yes, the country would have. I don't know how much the country would have been put through an impeachment of Nixon because he didn't have that many fans at that point.
Yeah. So Thomas Sowell, he's saying, impeaching, like pardoning Nixon when Gerald Ford did that is pretty much enabling the bad behavior. And then he goes into like how Bill Clinton got into that bad behavior afterward, and there was no repercussions for repercussions for his actions. And so, I mean, we see that today. I mean, right now, I mean, we had the recent, arrest of Donald Trump, and then you have, Biden here, and there's been quite a bit of allegations there too, right? But these people are getting in office with all these corrupt behaviors and such, and they're not being held accountable. And so, like, he's talking about how Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon, which he felt like he was so angry at that because he should have been held accountable.
But the idea that some people can commit these crimes, because I suspect that had Nixon been convicted and served a little jail time, I suspect that Clinton might have watched this step a lot more carefully.
Which president offered you the Federal Trade Commissioner's job?
President Ford.
What were the circumstances?
They had a vacancy. It was 1976, and they offered it to me, and I agreed to take it on condition that if there's any opposition that arises, they let me know. I'll withdraw because I don't have time to play Washington games. And I kept calling there and asking the guy at the White House who's handling this, is there any? I don't hear anything. What's going on? And he said, "Oh no, it's just taking time." And eventually, I was in Washington, so I went up to the Hill and talked to the staffer of this committee that handled this. And he said, "We've gone over your record with a fine-tooth comb. We can find nothing to object to. And therefore, we're just not going to hold hearings. Because this is an election year, we expect our guy is going to be elected, and he'll appoint his own man." What burned me was that he said, and I said, "Did you tell the White House this?" He said, "We told the White House this months ago." And I went back to the guy at the White House, and I said, "I just talked to this fellow on the Hill, and either he's lying or you're lying. Which is it?" And he started hemming and hawing, and I turned and walked out. I sent them a one-line withdrawal letter from the hotel and hotel station area, and that was the end of it.
Thomas Sowell is like cold. He's cold with it, so like these people were playing games with him getting into the office, into the position. And so he's like, well, I'm not finna play this political game with you, and either you want my services or you don't. And he sends them the one line. That's straight cold.
Are you sad you never served in government?
No, my gosh, no.
Why?
Stuff like this is one reason. That, Harry Truman said, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. And anyone who was asked my opinion about going to Washington, serving in government, I can't think of anyone I said that they should do it. Some people have credited me with having some influence with Clarence Thomas. I obviously don't, because I told him when he was at the EEOC and he was looking around what he's going to do next, I said, get out of Washington and stay out of Washington. So he wouldn't even be where it is if he listened to me.
What are your expectations about the possibility of him being nominated to be Chief Justice?
No idea. I mean, I know less about Washington politics than I know about anything else.
But I guess maybe a better question is, what would happen if he were nominated, in your opinion?
Oh, there would be the usual kind of cheap shot reruns at confirmation hearings. I think he'd probably get confirmed, and it will be great for the court. I'm not sure it will be great for him or not.
Hey, so this dude is just
welcome to Uncommon Knowledge.
He's just an OG. He's been in the space quite a bit. He was. We saw a clip before of him with Biden trying to question him, and Thomas Sowell checkmating him with the facts. And then, on this situation, I mean, Justice Clarence Thomas, he knew him and everything. And I don't know if they were friends or what their relationship was like, but, he said, stay out of government. And this is like really like why I am becoming more drawn to the libertarian side, because government is too big. Government is too powerful. Thomas Sowell said a lot of things in there where, these guys that are committing these scandals and everything need to be held accountable. They're not held accountable. Obviously, the whole back and forth and the games that they play and things like that. And he said he's glad he's never went into government. And so, I think that, we need smaller government for sure. I mean, we know about the debt situation. We know about the budget deficits, $2 trillion budget deficit. So we definitely need a smaller government and everything. And I just think that that's the way that I'm kind of leaning more towards, politically, because yeah, this is it's a mess. It's a mess for sure. So let's see, somebody over here. Um, let's see, Ask Northwest Clips. That's fascinating. I've never heard of Mr. Sowell before this year. Yeah, the crazy part is Thomas Sowell, like, Democrats don't ever mention him. Like I've heard about him from the Republicans, quite a bit, but Democrats don't ever mention him. I don't know if it was because of his ties with Milton Friedman, and Milton Friedman, was I think he advised President Reagan, and which was a Republican or whatnot. But like Thomas Sowell, like he's very, very, wise, knowledgeable. Like he's like, I think he should be, have more fame than what he has. I mean, he's famous, but don't get me wrong, but he should have more fame than what he has. But a lot of things that he says is contrary to the Democratic Party agenda and their narratives that they want to push. And so that's the reason why I think he's not out there. This was a cool part of this book. I'm listening to his audio book here. I'm gonna play a quick part of it. But it's called Black Rednecks and White Liberals. And this book is just it's just blowing me away, y'all. Just the amount of history in here. And it just has you rethinking everything that you've learned in school. So we're gonna listen to a little bit of it. Here he talks about how welfare destroyed Black family.
Were among the features of this subculture that were artificially prolonged. Prior to the 1960s, while Black males had a higher murder rate than other males, their murder rate was also declining more sharply than the general murder rate. Subsequently, the general murder rate in the United States and the murder rate for Black males both reversed and began rising sharply, that of Black males more sharply than others. In short, the drastic changes in law enforcement and social morality during the 1960s had particularly adverse effects on the behavior and actions of Blacks and on Black victims of the criminals in their midst. Intellectuals have also played a role, along with the welfare state, in prolonging and legitimizing a counterproductive culture among Blacks. Nowhere was the effect of the white liberalism of the 1960s on the social evolution of Black culture more devastating than in the disintegration of the Black family. The raw facts are these. As of 1960, 51% of Black females between the ages of 15 and 44 were married and living with their husbands. Another 20% were divorced, widowed, or separated. And only 28% had never been married. 20 years later, only 31% of Black women in these age brackets were married and living with their husbands, while 48% had never married. By 1994, an absolute majority, 56%, of Black women in these age brackets were never married, and only 25% were married and living with their husbands. Accordingly, while 2/3 of Black children were living with both parents in 1960, only 1/3 were by 1994. While only 22% of Black children were born to unmarried women in 1960, 70% were by 1994.
This is just like some really hard-hitting facts that he's bringing up, and he talks about the welfare state when these policies were passed. They tried to give, okay, if you're a single woman, single mother or whatnot, you can receive welfare benefits. And so you have to be single. And so this disincentivized marriages. It disincentivized, Black men couldn't be in the home, things of that nature, or else they couldn't receive any type of benefits or welfare assistance and such. And so Larry Elder called this is when Black women married the government. And so so when the government passed those policies, this created a huge ripple effect. Just even as Thomas Sowell said, like, the marriage rate for Black women was 51% in the 60s, and then by 1994 it was at 17, or I think it was it 22% or 17% or something like that. And so and it reduced 20% in like within 10 years. And so why is that an issue? That's an issue because, you know, if you're married and you have two incomes, like, you're likely to not be in poverty. You're likely to become a homeowner. Kids are being raised in a functional, hopefully a functional home, right? Kids are being raised with both parents in the home, which statistics show that they're going to do better, if both parents are involved in their lives. And so, Thomas Sowell just talks about how the welfare state, pretty much impacted the Black community in that way. So this is a really good book, so you can understand a lot of history. A lot of this history on here, I mean, I'll tell you right now, this book might get you shot. you know, Depending on, which liberal you talking to, you know what I'm saying? It I just think that the facts are there, Um as Northwest said, my bad. I ain't got 5%. I got 5% battery, so I'm gonna wrap it up here soon. It's everybody though. I'm not Black, but raised by a single mother. Ideally, we would all have two parents living at home, but even things can be very bad. Agreed. However, like, what Thomas Sowell is saying is that, I mean, even in the 1950s, post World War II, you had the Black poverty rate dropped, I think 40%, 40 points. So, something was working back then. You know what I mean? That's pretty much what he's saying. It's like something was working back then, but then it was when more government involvement was introduced into the picture. Then you begin to see marriages fall off. You begin to see, the home ownership, fall off. All of those things, right? And so, there's some good facts on um, some sites that I found a while ago. Um, let's see. See if I can find it. Boom, boom, boom. Let me see if I can find it really quick. I had found this chart a while ago. It was a really good chart that showed home ownership amongst African Americans, and like we had owned a lot more homes back in the 50s, 60s, and today, we're like almost at the same rate of home ownership. So it's like, how come things didn't improve, right? What occurred that caused things not to improve? Part of that is that you had more marriages back then. You had two incomes in the household. Obviously, the dollar had more value back then. So, I mean, that's another piece of government involvement, pretty much destroying the value of the dollar with their spending and such. And so there's a lot of different impacts, that we have seen. So, like, this is a site right here I'm looking at. This is just a quick one I pulled up. I'm gonna jump to it real quick. Let's see, jump to it. Boom, boom. All right, so this is Black home ownership. So no better today than the 1960s. In the past 15 years, Black home ownership rates have declined to levels not seen since the 1960s, when private race-based discrimination was legal. So I don't even think that was what I was looking for, but we can see that. How come home ownership today, if the 60s were worse and more racist back then, Jim Crow, all these things, how come home ownership isn't better today? You know what I'm saying? So when Thomas Sowell is mentioning a lot of these facts, he's saying, like, how certain government policies, which him and Milton Friedman, they will always go after government policies. Milton Friedman famously said, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program, and so like, the government, big government passes these laws, these policies, and they affect communities. And so that's pretty much what Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman would address and stuff. So y'all, I got to get going. Laptop's about to go dead. But I hope y'all had a good night. Enjoy watching this stuff with you all. Like, it's good just to process things in a different way. We talk about finance and investing a lot. So it's good to talk about like other components that relate to economics, as Thomas Sowell's an economist that studied under one of the greats, Milton Friedman. And so I'm gonna catch up with you all soon. Interview with Doomberg is dropping tomorrow, first part. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. It's a really good one. So hope that you all enjoy it. All right, y'all take care. Peace.